Uh, Distinguished speakers, esteemed participants, members of the diplomatic missions, friends from media, scholars and experts, ladies and gentlemen. Namaste and good morning from Kathmandu. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all at the Indo-Pacific Future Forum 2024. Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement is an independent, apolitical, and non-partisan think tank which believes in freedom, democracy, and a world free from conflict. We envision a world where sources of insecurity are identified and understood, conflicts are prevented or resolved, and peace is advocated. NICE has four research centers: China Studies, Neighborhood Studies, Indo-Pacific Affairs, and Non-Traditional Security Studies. Center for Indo-Pacific Affairs is one of our important research centers. The Indo-Pacific region holds significant importance for Nepal due to its strategic location and emerging geopolitical dynamics. As a landlocked country, Nepal relies heavily on regional cooperation for trade, connectivity, and economic growth. The Indo-Pacific maritime routes are vital for Nepal's imports and exports, in enhancing its global market access. Additionally, regions focus on sustainable development, resilience, and infrastructure aligns with Nepal's priorities. Engagement in Indo-Pacific frameworks provides Nepal opportunities for partnerships in technology, education, and tourism, balancing relations with key players like India, China, and the US. Nepal can leverage the region's economic dynamics while safeguarding its strategic autonomy. It is in this context we are hosting Indo-Pacific Future Forum, which is the flagship event of the Indo-Pacific Research Network and the Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement. Indo-Pacific Research Network is the initiative of NICE to bring together scholars working on different issues on the Indo-Pacific regions. The theme of the two-day forum is Connecting Sagar to Sagar, where represents the Indo-Pacific region and Sagar refers to Sagarmatha, Mount Everest. This forum aims to foster dialogue, collaboration, and a deeper understanding of strategic issues impacting the Indo-Pacific region by bringing together policymakers, scholars, and experts from around the region. The objectives of the forum are to strengthen regional cooperation, address geopolitical challenges, encourage multilateral engagement, and foster policy vision. Today, we host around 140 participants from 32 countries across 19 sessions. We are supported by 10 reputed institutes, which are ARZU International, Queensland, Australia, Bangladesh Center for Indo-Pacific Affairs, Dhaka, Bangladesh, Indo-Pacific Program Will Center, Washington, D.C., USA, Institute for Security and Diplomacy Policy, Stockholm, Sweden, Institute for International Security Studies, Colombo, Sri Lanka, and Masariki Research and Policy Center, Nairobi, Kenya, NATSTART, New Delhi, India, National Maritime Foundation, New Delhi, India, the Graduate School of International Studies, Ewha Women University, Seoul, South Korea, Yakusuku Council on Asia Pacific Studies, Kanagawa, Japan. We are really thankful for the support, and Indo-Pacific stands for a free, open, and rules-based order that ensures fairness and inclusivity among nations. Thus, we have also tried our best to have voices from around the region, diverse voices with adequate women and youth representation. The event is streaming on the NICE Facebook page. Twitter, and YouTube. Please do share it on your social media so that it has greater reach. To share more on this objective of this forum and the role of Nepal in the Indo-Pacific region, I would like to invite Dr. Pramod, Research Director of NICE. He would also be monitoring this session. And I once again welcome all the distinguished speakers and wish everyone wonderful deliberations. Thank you so much, Dr. Jaiswal. Over to you.
Thank you, Madam Director, distinguished speakers, friends from the diplomatic corps, friends from media, scholars and experts, ladies and gentlemen. Namaste, good morning, and welcome to the first Indo-Pacific Future Forum. As Ms. Karki said, Indo-Pacific Affairs is one of our important research topic. In order to connect with scholars who work on this region, we have created Indo-Pacific Research Network with the aim to promote, coordinate, and collaborate on research on Indo-Pacific. The theme, as Ms. Karki said, the theme of today's forum is connecting Sagar to Sagar, where Sagar represents the Indo-Pacific region and Sagar refers to Sagarmatha, which is Mount Everest. The aim of this forum is to generate dialogue, discussions on Indo-Pacific affairs in the region in general and on Nepal in particular. So today what I'm going to do is briefly, I want to share some of the slides where we share how we look at the Indo-Pacific region, where does Nepal stands on. So the first question when you say that, when we express that we are working on Nepal's outlook on Indo-Pacific, the first question we often get is that, does maritime security matters for Nepal? And the answer is yes. Let's see how we conceptualize our maritime security. We all know that Nepal and India has open border. It is very open, where there is no securitized borders between the two countries. If you look at the images, there are three different points where you can say Nepal and India. There is no presence of security forces. In some places, there are gates that represent the two countries, but you will not find any formal channels at many places. So there is no visa required. There is no security checks, just custom clearances at limited locations. There are almost like 22 or 24 in 1800 kilometers. So it's very open border. Thus, through the political borders end at Nepal-India border, from security perspectives, it ends at the sea, where the Indian maritime security border ends. So that's why, in terms of security, our border ends at Indian Ocean. Hence, India's maritime border can be seen as virtual maritime border for Nepal as well. So that is one that we claim that in terms of security, Nepal is a virtual maritime country because our concern goes to the Indian Ocean. That is first. Second, through BIMSTEC and its connectivity project, Nepal also seeks to have greater role and visibility in the Indo-Pacific region, as it provides Nepal greater access and greater role. So legally, through different framework, we have access to Indian Ocean as well. The third question that comes is that, so first we say, yes, Nepal is a maritime country. It's virtually, as long as Nepal has open border with India, Nepal will remain a virtual maritime country from security perspective. Now, second is that we see deep relation between Indo-Pacific water and Himalayas. The map that is the figure that is on the right, it shows a weather map, but I think it also works in the geopolitics because there's a deep relation between the Himalayas region and the Indo-Pacific water. Because what we have seen is that when India wanted to challenge China in the Indo-Pacific water, particularly Indian Ocean, what we call Sagar, through Quad and number of initiatives where India and US started getting closer, China started to challenge India in the Himalayan region, which is Sagarmatha, the Everest. Because China is in that Himalayan region, and that particular region hold huge strategic stakes for India. So the competition of Indo-Pacific water has been reflected on the Himalayas. So that is the reason that we think here in Nepal, the Himalayan region, that this kind of debates, discussion, and stakes on Indo-Pacific is important for Nepal. Thus, every time when India has pronounced its commitment to Quad or Indo-Pacific strategy, it has hit by a border standoff, incursion by China, like Doklam, Pangongso, Sikkim, Eastern Ladakh, Galwan Valley, and several others. So this clearly shows that whether Nepal accepts to be a part of Indo-Pacific or not, whether they want to engage on these initiatives or not, Nepal will have to pay the price. We can also see some media reports that China has started to claim some strategic location in Humla of Nepal, which is aimed at India. I think India-China rivalry and competition in the Indo-Pacific region has huge implications for Nepal and the Himalayan region. Therefore, without securitizing the Himalayan region, it is challenging for India to make remarkable progress on Quad or any of those initiatives. So, second, here we come to the point that whether Nepal accepts to be a part of Indo-Pacific dialogue or not, initiatives or not, Nepal will have to pay the price due to its geopolitical location. Now, third, what is Nepal's understanding on Indo-Pacific and Quad? Nepal has great opportunity in the Indo-Pacific region and the Indo-Pacific minilaterals because we know it's a huge, vast land with huge population resources. So I think Nepal believes that Himalayan region has a north point location for the competition in the Indo-Pacific region, and it's cautiously optimistic on that. The Commander-in-Chief of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, Admiral Philip Davidson, he visited Nepal in January 2019, and he reiterated that Nepal has a crucial role to play in stabilizing the Indo-Pacific region. That's why Nepal, between the two geopolitical competition, the major player of the geopolitical competition in the Indo-Pacific region, is on the two sides of Nepal. That's why I think Nepal has a very important position. It has a very important role to play, and it has huge stakes as well. And Nepal believes that Indo-Pacific has led the extension of bilateral and multilateral engagement in South Asia. Himalayan countries such as Nepal has been crucial, especially due to its strategic location between the two Asian economy and military giants, India and China. As I said, as the current chair nation of SAARC and the member of BIMSTEC, the US reckons that Nepal can play a crucial role in the Indo-Pacific region. US also want Nepal to play a greater role in the region as part of the strategy is to increase regional connectivity. In the Indo-Pacific Strategy Report of U.S. Department of Defense, Nepal was added to the U.S. State Partnership Program in the Indo-Pacific. Nepal and Sri Lanka were given the status of potential partner in their strategy, and the U.S. offers to hold a joint military exercise with Nepal for disaster management, humanitarian assistance, and others. Nepal has shown constraints on state partnership program due to geopolitical pressure. Similarly, there are remarks from U.S. which said that MC is a part of Indo-Pacific, which has been criticized by people in Nepal. At the same time, US has also changed its stand on those parts. In conclusion, I think Nepal believes in free, open, and rule-based world order that ensures fairness and inclusivity among nations, which is also the principle of free and fair Indo-Pacific. Nepal's oldest and major ties is with the Britain. The first diplomatic ties we had with Britain, which was followed by US, then other countries like India, China, France, and Japan, European Union. So most of the countries with which Nepal has established diplomatic ties are democratic countries because Nepal believes in democracy, Nepal believes in transparency, rule-based world order. Thus, it is in Nepal's interest to align with its partner and benefit economically. However, Nepal should avoid any engagement, especially strategic, that can go against any of its neighbor or its friendly countries. Third, Nepal has huge hydropower potential, more than 40,000 megawatt, while only 22,000 has been produced so far. Nepal and Bangladesh can be a potential market. Recently, Nepal and India has agreed to generate 20,000 megawatt and export to India and Bangladesh. So we started exporting to Bangladesh as well, apart from India. Nepal should focus in this sector, and Indo-Pacific has a major focus on climate change and clean energy. So I think there is a huge opportunity for Nepal in this sector. Small states, they do not want to be caught into geopolitical rivalry, thus prefer economic initiatives over strategic, and it has sent mixed signals, and it wanted to be cautious because Nepal does not want to offend China on this front. Thus, to begin, the engagement in the Indo-Pacific should focus more on non-traditional security issues like climate change, climate security, clean energy, not military component, which is in fact the roadmap to at present, as the country in the region is focusing more on connectivity and economic development. I'd like to end here. Thank you. And I'd also like to invite the next speaker, Her Excellency Leann Johnston, who is Australian Ambassador to Nepal. Excellency, over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pramod, for those comments, and also Sumitra for your introduction. I'd like to welcome everyone, and I pay my respects to all participants and listeners, and my sincere apologies for not appearing in front of you in person. However, just to explain to everyone, I have come up with a severe allergic reaction to something or other, and I'm not fit for public presentation. So it's just my voice you have to listen to today, so my apologies. I'd like to thank the Nepal Institute for International Cooperation Engagement for organising today's event. Thank you. As Nepal, indeed the region, takes stock of the momentous events that have shaped this year, elections across the globe, conflict in the Middle East, climate deals in Kazakhstan, this forum is an important contribution to global listening and understanding. From saga to saga, from the sea to the mountaintop, stretching from the eastern shores of the Pacific to the western shores of the Indian Ocean, from the mountaintops of the Himalayas to the frozen glaciers of Antarctica. While a clear definition of the Indo-Pacific is open to debate, it is safe to assume that at least 2/3 of the world's population live in this region. And Australia sits in the middle and is deeply connected to this region. A free and open Indo-Pacific, therefore, is at the very core of Australia's interests. Free and open in terms of trade, in terms of movement, in terms of human rights, and in terms of how countries of the region engage with each other. Australia is committed to working with Indo-Pacific nations to achieve this. We want a region that is peaceful, stable, prosperous, and respectful of sovereignty, where disputes are addressed in accordance with international law and norms, not by power and size. We aim to do this with an economy built on trade and our foreign relations built on mutual respect and openness. We work to make this happen by upholding the rules and placing a deep focus on partnering with the region, which is why a large part of Australian government's foreign policy has been centred on strengthening our relationships in the Pacific, Southeast Asia, and the broader region, seeking to make Australia a partner of choice for countries across the Indo-Pacific. We have heard calls from the Pacific for deeper connections and easier movement. The Pacific Engagement Visa is a new permanent residence visa for eligible Pacific and Timor-Leste citizens that commenced earlier this year. The PEV will grow the Pacific and Timor-Leste communities in Australia and will strengthen the links, therefore, between people and encourage business and education ties. The government will continue to engage with Pacific partners to ensure the program meets shared needs and priorities in support of a peaceful, prosperous, and resilient Pacific region. The Australia-Papua New Guinea Bilateral Security Agreement entered into force earlier this week. The agreement is a landmark chapter in the Australia-Papua New Guinea Comprehensive Security and Economic Partnership. It takes a broad view of security consistent with the norms, values, and collective security goals of the Pacific Islands Forum. As such, it provides for deeper cooperation in traditional areas of security, like defence, policing, border, and maritime security, as well as non-traditional areas of cybersecurity, climate change, gender-based violence, and critical infrastructure. The Australia-Tuvalu-Falapili Union represents a momentous step in the elevated partnership between our two countries. It puts in place transformational arrangements to safeguard the future of Tuvalu and advances our shared interests in a peaceful, safe, and prosperous Pacific. With the treaty now in force, Australia undertakes to respond when Tuvalu calls for assistance, for example, for a major natural disaster, health pandemic, or military aggression. We will work together to open our special mobility pathway, which will provide Tuvaluans with the opportunity to live, work, and study in Australia. The pace and scale of delivery of this groundbreaking initiative is unparalleled in the Australian system, reflecting the strength and value of our enhanced partnership. We expedited delivery of the Guardian-class patrol boat to help Tuvalu monitor its vast economic zone and fishing areas. The Vaka, Tuvalu's first undersea telecommunications cable, landed in Tuvalu this week with assistance from Australia, less than 4 months after the treaty came into force. Likewise, the Pacific Policing Initiative is a Pacific-led, Australian-backed initiative and is a major regional measure to strengthen collective peace and security throughout the Pacific, boosting the capability of the Pacific countries to meet law and order and internal security requirements, and to help each other in times of need. Australia was part of the first deployment of the Pacific Police Support Group to provide security support for Samoa's hosting of the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in October this year. 46 police officers from 11 Pacific countries and territories participated in this deployment, including the Australian Federal Police and Samoa Police. The Australian government is also doing much to give effect to the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals agenda through the aid program, including through significant investments in health and education, increasing aid for trade investments to 20% of the aid budget, helping our developing country partners increase domestic revenue and strengthen their business and investment environments, and doubling our investments to support developing countries strengthen their tax systems, increase domestic resource mobilisation, and promote good economic governance. This indeed is a key pillar of our assistance to Nepal, as evidenced in our subnational governance program. The Australian government has also set a target requiring at least 80% of aid investments effectively address gender issues in their implementation. And on this point, I'm pleased to note that our subnational governance development program here in Nepal has been acknowledged for its work to support women's empowerment at local levels, and our recently concluded Water Basin project has been awarded an Environment Award for its work on gender, disability, and inclusivity. The Australian government recognises that its prosperity, security, and economic future are intimately linked with Southeast Asia. This defines our relationship with the region. By 2040, Southeast Asia as a bloc is expected to be the fourth largest economy in the world. Its middle class already numbers close to 200 million people. The Moore report invested Australia's Southeast Asia economic strategy to 2040 provides a practical roadmap to increase Australia's two-way trade and investment with the region, and seeks to ensure we are jointly positioned to maximise the potential of our economic ties. The more we trade and build mutually beneficial relationships, the more integrated and open our region becomes. Australia is working with partners in South and Central Asia to create a stable, prosperous, and resilient region. Australia's development cooperation in this region focuses on addressing transboundary challenges, enhancing regional cooperation, and deploying our expertise in water resources, agriculture, trade, and infrastructure to support long-term stability and economic resilience. The South and Central Asia Regional Programme supports technical assistance, project preparation, analysis and research, capability building, people-to-people links, advocacy and policy reform. Gender equality, disability inclusion, and climate change are focuses of all investments under the regional programme. Australia is also building the capability of regional institutions, including the Indian Ocean Rim Association, and promoting greater cooperation in maritime safety and security, women's economic empowerment, and the blue economy of the Indian Ocean region. Australia's engagement in South Asia is also characterised by strong people-to-people links, cultural ties, and increasing trade and investment. More than 1.5 million Australians claim South Asian heritage, and South Asian migrant communities are among our fastest growing. We share and foster close people-to-people ties through the Australia Awards, the New Colombo Plan, and the Australian Volunteers programs. Expertise through Australian government agencies is highly valued and sought after, particularly in agriculture, infrastructure, energy transition, environment, ocean and water resource management, and trade. Australian-supported technical assistance and training are expanding trade, investment, connectivity in South Asia. So the way we manage our interests in the face of challenges is only partly through direct dealing. Much of the answer lies in approaching these challenges in regional terms. So again, I thank NICE for organising this very important event and for all our other panellists and participants' contributions. One of the key means of ensuring a peaceful, stable and prosperous region is through free trade and through free and open trade. Australia's openness to foreign investment has helped to build Australia, create jobs, and raise living standards through the introduction of new technology and by fostering competition. I promise I'm nearly finished. Foreign investment was central to the development of our agriculture, resources, energy, infrastructure, and financial sectors, and will be critical as we transition to a net zero economy. Foreign companies employ 1 in 8 Australian workers. The multilateral trading system, underpinned by WTO rules, is fundamental to Australia's and the world's prosperity and security. Greater economic engagement across the region also helps build alignment. It helps foster a dynamic that reassures the region around tensions for peace and prosperity. We all have a responsibility to shape the region we want to share, one that is peaceful, stable, and prosperous. Maintaining this character is a continuous process, an ongoing process. It requires all of us to nurture and protect agreed rules, uphold international law, prevent conflict, and build strategic trust. And we all want countries, large or small, to operate by the same rules and norms. These principles are embedded in our foreign policy and our approach to the region. So thank you very much for your time today. I know that was long, but thank you.
Thank you so much, Excellency. We have got a few questions, so I think maybe I can raise you immediately. Like, how does Australia's strategy address the interests and concern of Pacific Island nations, especially regarding non-traditional security threats such as climate change, pandemic, cyber threat, and others? And what steps Nepal and Australia can take on climate change?
Thanks, Pramod. So Australia's security interests in the region are served, as I said, through multilateral or through regional approaches, but also through bilateral approaches. So we support the Pacific through the Guardian Patrol Boat program. This is where we gift patrol boats to Pacific Island nations to help them monitor their own economic exclusion zones and to uphold the integrity of their fishing arrangements, in order to promote their own economic interests and independence and not have them vulnerable to illegal fishing and people movements. And so that is one element of our security arrangements in the Pacific. We also, as I said, have a bilateral security arrangement with a country like Papua New Guinea. Our interests in Papua New Guinea are significant, and we have a very long-term engagement and history and historical links with Papua New Guinea. And so the bilateral security arrangement that we signed or that entered into force this week does support traditional ideas of security, but it also explores ways that we can cooperate on non-traditional security issues, such as climate change, such as cybersecurity. And we're also, just on climate change, we are cognizant of the impact that developed nations may have had on Pacific Island nations. And we've certainly heard that their concerns. Tuvalu is one of the countries in which I previously served. So I know their concerns firsthand. And I know that they are at extreme risk of climate change. We are helping them manage some of that by helping them reclaim some land, to help build infrastructure, to help them face the challenge. And, Tuvalu has a very innovative approach to securing its cultural future by developing a digital, if you like, a digital presence in the cloud, on the internet, to ensure their cultural future. And we'll be very happy to be partnering with them on that. And our support for the telecommunications arrangement helps them realize that dream. So, and a lot of our programs in the Pacific, whether it's mangrove or swamp protection, whether it's building adaptable food programs, goes to that argument about climate change.
Thank you, Excellency. You just mentioned infrastructure. Now we have another question on that. How does Australia incorporate sustainable development goals into the Indo-Pacific strategy, particularly in sector like energy and infrastructure? These are two sectors really important for Nepal. So do you see Nepal and Australia partnering in these sectors?
I think that there are ways that we can partner with Nepal in these areas, and we do that through our regional investment arrangement. We do identify or ask hydropowers or policymakers to identify people who might benefit from training or professional opportunities in Australia to help develop some of that expertise locally on how to build and manage as you say, hydro and electricity infrastructure. We don't have the resources to invest directly as a government in Nepal's infrastructure, but we are prepared to help Nepal find ways to secure financing for some of those projects. And we certainly have expertise in Australia in building, managing hydro schemes, particularly in Tasmania, and in the ACT, near where I live. And so we are very much interested in exploring ways that we can develop the technical assistance, technical expertise. We feel that we have that expertise that we can share and develop with Nepal. But in terms of investment in infrastructure, I think that is best to the private market or to the large banks. But certainly we would be interested in exploring foreign direct investment in Nepal in those areas. But I think it would probably need some changes to some of the regulatory frameworks here in Nepal to really fully utilize that potential.
Thank you so much, Excellency. Thank you so much for your remarks. We're really honored to have you here. May I now invite the next speaker, Admiral Karambir Singh, who is the chairperson, National Maritime Foundation. Admiral, over to you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. We can hear you and we can see you as well.
Thank you so much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. At the very outset, I wish to thank all of you for giving me this opportunity to participate in this conference. And the topic for our session today is maintaining a free and open Indo-Pacific. So when we speak of Indo-Pacific, the last few years has witnessed, increasing geostrategic focus on the Indo-Pacific. And why not? Because economically, the Indo-Pacific region is about 60% of the world GDP. We have 50% of the world's young. So there's the future in this region. It's the home for several fast-growing economies. And as our Indian External Affairs Minister, Dr. Jaishankar says, and I quote, Indo-Pacific is an integral part of global conversations. And the focus of the world on the Indo-Pacific is pretty evident. In the past 4 odd years, 15 countries and groupings have published their Indo-Pacific policies, strategies, and outlooks. And if you go through these strategies and outlooks, you realize as far as the understanding of free, open, and prosperous Indo-Pacific goes, nearly all these strategies encapsulate the importance of maintaining a free and open Indo-Pacific, as does India's vision of Sagar. This is a third Sagar, security and growth for all in the region. When I look at our own India's Indo-Pacific articulation, I think that India has got it right as far as the Indo-Pacific articulation is concerned. Because if you were to delve a little deeper, we would realize that Sagar, the security and growth for all in the region, is perhaps the first instance where the in tandem pursuit of holistic security on one hand and economic progress on the other, and that too in a regional framework, has been made a national priority. So Sagar, that is one. Second, Sagar and the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, they rightly speak the language of development as opposed to the language of contestation. Again, India's articulation of the Indo-Pacific is not against anyone, but for something. And that is the free, open, and inclusive Indo-Pacific. This has universal appeal and resonates with most countries, big and small. And it also clearly signals that the Indo-Pacific is more than the US-China contestation. In fact, if you look at the area which the India considers as Indo-Pacific, it extends from the east coast of Africa. And this is important, unlike some other countries, because Africa is the future, demographically and resource-wise. So I think it is important that we include Africa in the Indo-Pacific. And also, whilst the Indo-Pacific, Indian Ocean region is of critical importance to India, the Indo-Pacific articulation has, to my mind, helped India think beyond the Indian Ocean box. So having said that, there are some very serious challenges in the Indo-Pacific region post-COVID, in this post-COVID world, that pose hurdles for ensuring a free and open Indo-Pacific. First, of course, is the great power competition, which is turned into confrontation. Today, the basic precepts of maritime orientation of the Indo-Pacific are being challenged. Competition and confrontation in the Indo-Pacific is becoming more diverse, involving levers, diplomacy, commerce, ideology, values, science and technology apart from the military. So we are actually seeing or witnessing a world splitting into two with all its attendant complications, pulls and pressures. And there are flashpoints in the Indo-Pacific, like the tensions in the Red Sea, South China Sea, Korean Peninsula, across Taiwan Straits, that have the danger of escalating to conflicts based on even the slightest miscalculation. And of course, conflicts in Ukraine and Gaza have left no country in the Indo-Pacific untouched. And add to this fact that the multilateral system like the UN are ineffective, to say the least. So all these problems, geopolitical problems, in the backdrop of serious non-traditional threats like climate change, piracy that has seen a recent spike, arms, drugs and human trafficking, etc. So when you look at all this and you wish to set the scene, if I wish to set the scene for the Indo-Pacific in the coming years, as a seaman, I see the mercury falling, which means a nasty weather approaching. And this is not good news for any nation, especially in India, region, and the countries of the global south that need stability and free open seas to advance economically. We all certainly don't need headwinds, especially post the destabilizing effects of COVID and, of course, the ongoing conflicts. So what can we do to keep the Indo-Pacific from boiling over? Whether it's Taiwan Strait, South China Sea, Straits of Hormuz, east coast of Africa, I think we in the region need to exist and compete in this evolving paradigm. And I think the only way is to collaborate, stay close-knit, build regional resilience, build something we call collective maritime competence, and also collectively build a power ballast amongst middle and small nations and nations of the global south to be able to call out any transgressions, even by large powers. And finally, avoid getting sucked into this negative spiral of Cold War mentality that sometimes dispenses with rationality. The good news is that given the predominantly maritime orientation of the Indo-Pacific, there's a natural tendency for nations to engage and collaborate. And India is doing that by drawing closer to its regional neighbors on the maritime domain. As our Indian External Affairs Minister recently penned a piece about a confident, creative, caring and contributive India, it is apparent that the country is now reaching outwards and is more aware of its regional security responsibilities. And this outreach and contribution to global public goods is primarily driven through the maritime domain. And this is pretty evident, amongst other things, in our Sagar vision, the Act East policy, the quadrilateral security dialogue, and the Indo-Pacific Oceans initiatives. So India has therefore invested in providing public goods in the Indo-Pacific through enhanced capacity building, capability enhancement, enhanced maritime domain awareness, building collective maritime competence, being a preferred security partner, and a first responder, etc. So having said that, what does India bring to the table in the Indo-Pacific region? I'll give you 4 or 5 points. They're not all inclusive, but this is what comes to my mind. First is, of course, the geographical location. I think India is blessed with a favorable maritime geography, one that is well suited to harness maritime orientation of the Indo-Pacific and positively influence this region. Second is the usable past. and therefore legitimacy. India has had a history of being peaceful and non-aggressive in the maritime space. The period of Indian supremacy in the oceans was of complete freedom of trade and navigation for vessels of all nations. During the Sri Vijaya Empire, for example, seafarers focused on trade and commerce and not the European-style conquest and imperialism or a policy of closing the seas, as even what is happening in South China Sea. So this usable past helps when we interact with many of the countries in the region, including the Gulf and East Africa. And these words, free, open, and inclusive, have greater resonance when spoken with this historical backdrop. Third strength India has is in possession of a reasonably capable navy that has a good understanding of the Indian Ocean region due to its almost continuous deployment, presence, and interactions with the countries of the littoral. So Indian Navy has built a certain amount of credibility as the preferred security partner in the Indian Ocean region, and which will help India contribute to collaborative efforts. Fourth strength, India possesses a large, and in fact, South Asia possesses a large diaspora in the Indo-Pacific and especially in the Indian Ocean region littoral, including West Asia, Vanilla Islands, east coast of Africa. And this, what you call the living bridge, is of great assistance in shaping their environment for a free and open Indo-Pacific. The fifth point is, and my last point, is the Indian policy like Neighborhood First, Sagar, Act East, Look West, and Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, amongst others, are collaborative, and they have an inclusive ring and intent. And of course, India's strategic autonomy would also provide a degree of acceptability when dealing with nations of the global south in these times of very charged geopolitical confrontation. So these are few strengths, mainly in the maritime domain, that India brings to the table when we speak of collaboration. And on similar lines, each of our partners, neighbors, and like-minded nations bring to the table several strengths. So together, we have to join together and become preferred security and development partners based on, principles of pillars of credibility, customization, conversation, and coordination. I won't go into the details of this, but we can discuss it. And platforms like Quad or Quad Plus, I2U2, IPOI, IORA, IONS, these all aim to provide public goods to the region. They can adequately support our collaborative efforts in the Indian Ocean region. And so I'll conclude by submitting that in today's vexed and complex landscape in the Indo-Pacific, it presents several challenges, such as great power rivalry, divergent perceptions on key security issues, the intransigence of some in accepting consensual approach, and lack of capability and capacity amongst stakeholders in the region. And I think the maritime domain is well suited to overcome these challenges because seas unite, not divide. And considering the wide expanse, complexity, and transnational nature of challenges at sea, we all know that no country can do it alone. So I think the maritime domain could become the medium to lead the Indo-Pacific region and indeed the world out of the present situation through cooperation, communication, collaboration, and connectivity. Connecting trade routes, infrastructure, institutions, and most importantly, peoples and ideas is sure to create an enabling network conducive to promoting peace and prosperity and ensuring free and open seas in these very difficult times. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Admiral Karambir Singh. Thank you so much for your insightful remarks. May I now invite Cleo Paskal, who is from Foundation for Defense of Democracies, US. Ms. Paskal, over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for including me. NICE does such great work. Thank you, Dr. Jaiswal, for bringing us all together in a way that only you can. I'm currently in Washington, D.C., so the big question, I think, for the future of the Indo-Pacific is what's going to be coming out of this town over the next 4 years. So I'd like to describe the process of if personnel is policy, the process here of putting together policy, because it's really like something nobody has ever seen. I've spoken to many old Washington hands who've been through other transitions, and they're also saying that they've never seen anything like this. And so it might be worth just spending a little bit of time trying to understand as much as we can about what's going on. The United system is unusual, especially for those of us from parliamentary systems, because when a new president comes in, there is this large-scale change of personnel, even between terms of the same president. So you might have a president who's in for 2 terms, but changes Secretary of State, for example, for their second term, and that Secretary of State might change several members of their senior team. There are thousands of these political appointment jobs, and part of the structure of Washington is that there are these politically aligned think tanks where, when your administration is out of power, you go and sit in those think tanks working on developing policies if your guy or gal ever comes back into power. But if your person does come back into power, you can come out of those think tanks and into the administrations. The famous or infamous Project 2025 was sort of an attempt to, not unusual attempt to get ahead of the game by a think tank in that case. Heritage, it was not President Trump's policies, even though there's crossover between some of the people that have been appointed and some of the people that worked on Project 2025. So how does it work? How do these personnel get selected? The big names, the big ticket names, Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, those sorts of people go obviously straight through President Trump. There will be interviews. The transition, normally, this is another thing that's very unusual, is normally when there's a transition, there is a U.S. government physical building that the transition team could move into while they're going through this process. And the FBI does background checks. There are these so-called landing teams where the incoming administration goes into the office of the outgoing administration so they can learn what's going on, what the open files are, get briefed, that sort of thing. In this case, so far, the President Trump transition has been largely run out of Palm Beach or Mar-a-Lago down in Florida, and in many cases has not gone through these FBI background checks, in part because of the experience that President Trump had with the FBI during his last administration. So there's very poor trust, and the messages coming out of the transition is sort of they're waiting to get more control over their own over the FBI itself before they use the FBI to do background checks, because in the framework where if you think the FBI is hostile to you, having them do background checks is giving them the power to coerce or blackmail your potential candidates. I'm telling you, it's a very unusual situation going on here. So how do people get potentially selected? All across town, I've been at several Christmas parties recently. People want to get on the lists that go to different parts of the transition team or to influential people or to relatives or whomever. That then gets, those lists then get theoretically, at least for the lower level jobs, collated, and if a name appears on multiple lists, then sometimes that might increase their chances of getting pushed up higher. But what goes along with the name is what job they want. And the jobs are listed in what's called the Plum Book. This is a U.S. government publication that you can see for free online, which lists about 1,000 government jobs that can be political appointees. And these can range from Secretary of State to sort of the Historical Preservation Society Oversight Group. So what happens is people will try to get their name on those lists with their preferred Plum List jobs next to them. And then in theory, it goes through somewhere to the transition, and then those jobs get filled out. Now, what's happening to a large degree, which is new, is there are actually two Republican administrations now, or two Republican groupings. There's a traditional Republican Party, and then there's this MAGA Republican Party. They're very different. The Trumplican Republicans are very different than traditional Republicans. Close. Sorry, thank you. I'm in a sort of busy office. I'm just asking for the door to be closed. The Trumplicans are a different creature, and there is a civil war within the Republican Party over a lot of these positions, including in the administrations. It's sort of deeper down in the bureaucracy. So. For the point of view, and this all goes back to answering this question of what the United States is going to be emerging on the Indo-Pacific front. And I think what we're seeing so far, if these picks get through the Republican Senate, which has much more traditional Republicans in them, although those traditional Republicans are being effectively threatened by MAGA world to be primaried if they give a problem for the confirmations on things like Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense, is you'll see a much more MAGA type administration coming in. What does that mean for India? Well, if you take a look at those tendencies in the first Trump administration, that was when PACOM, for example, became Indo-PACOM. This is a very Indo-Pacific friendly Trump administration the first time around. This was when there was a strong personal relationship between Prime Minister Modi, Prime Minister Abe, Scott Morrison, Prime Minister Scott Morrison, and Trump, which led in part to the resurrection of the Quad. There was a signing of a whole bunch of defense agreements with India. The first Trump administration was very good for the Indo-Pacific, and the indications that we're getting out of the second Trump administration are a similar, very different approach than the Biden administration disconnect. And for those of you who aren't following this, one big indication was the tweet that President Trump sent out on October 31st about what's happening in Bangladesh. And I'm just gonna read it out quickly because it gives a sense of perhaps the direction that Trump 2.0 is heading in. So he tweeted on October 31st, so before the election, "I strongly condemn the barbaric violence against Hindus, Christians, and other minorities who are getting attacked and looted by mobs in Bangladesh, which remains in total chaos. It would never have happened on my watch. We will also protect Hindu Americans against the anti-religious agenda of the radical left. We will fight for your freedom. Under my administration, we will also strengthen the great partnership with India and my good friend, Prime Minister Modi." So this is a very different sort of approach to the region than we saw or we're seeing under the Biden administration. And I think there was a lot of concern within the region, especially within India, when the State Department was perhaps not as heavily invested in a strong with India as Department of Defense is, for example. And if the past prologue and if this transition continues down the road it is, which means that it would become even more MAGA, and these sort of tweets continue to come out of President Trump himself, I think you'll see a very strong commitment, actually, to a free and open Indo-Pacific that is much more focused on some of the countries in the region, like India, Japan, to a degree Australia, but the region as it is itself. Now, I would just like to, just because Her Excellency spoke about the Pacific Islands, and everybody on here knows I can't resist talking about the Pacific Islands, I'm just going to end off very quickly with a note of concern. My concern is that some of the policies that Australia is promoting or pushing forward with in the region are potentially very dangerous. And specifically, the Australia-Tuvalu Agreement, which was mentioned, and the Australia-Nauru Agreement, which was also mentioned, which result in some abrogation of sovereignty from the islands toward Australia, were both government-to-government agreements. Now, there is often invoking of the U.S. relationship, compact relationship with Palau, Marshall Islands, Federated States of Micronesia, and saying this is similar. This is not similar. The relationship between the U.S. and those three countries was decided by plebiscite. The locals of those countries made the decision through referenda and public debate to agree to those to that arrangement. In the case of Australia-Nauru and Australia-Tuvalu, those were government to government. Those were not discussed and decided by plebiscite by the population. And that is a terrible precedent to set, because what then stops, for example, China from having a similar government to government relationship set up in the region with other Pacific Island countries. Australia would be very hard pressed to take the moral high ground on that, because they've similarly just done that sort of an agreement. So I think also, going back to the Trump administration coming in, some of the people who may be going in know the region very well, and possibly won't see that as a force for stability in the way that Canberra may think it's being reflected. So all that to say, very unusual time here in DC. Pieces are moving very quickly, but if Trump 1.0 had anything to say about the Indo-Pacific, and it did, I suspect that will be continuing on steroids during Trump 2.0. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Cleo Paskal. Thank you for your remarks. May I now invite Captain Retired Teruaki Aizawa, who is Associate Professor at Department of Leadership and Military History, National Defense Academy, School of Defense Science in Japan. So over to you. So would you like me to share your slides, or will you be sharing yourself?
Okay. I'd like to use PowerPoint. Doctor, do you see PowerPoint slide?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We can see it, sir.
Okay. Well, good morning from Japan. I'm Teruaki Aizawa, National Defense Academy, Japan. So I'd like to talk about free and open Indo-Pacific and FOIP, and free and open international order, FOIO. Very basic explanation, about 10 minutes. Okay? First of all, I'm not good at English comprehension, so I would appreciate if you could ask me a question a little more slowly and with using as simple phrase as possible at the later Q&A session. Also, since we are online today, it would be very helpful if you could ask me any questions by Zoom chat. As for one more thing, my viewpoint is solely that of as one of researcher. I'd like to disclaim in advance that this viewpoint is not representative of the Japanese government, the Ministry of Defense, and National Defense Academy. And content is as shown on the screen. First, I'd like to briefly introduce my background, including my involvement with FOIP. I'm a practical researcher as a retired captain of JMSDF. I was mine warfare officer and a EOD diver in JMSDF. I also had extensive experience in national security policy, related research, and administrative work, including being seconded to Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I retired from JMSDF 8 years ago, and when worked for 2 years as a specialist in MOFA. 6 years ago, I was hired as a special research fellow at the Sasakawa Peace Foundation Ocean Policy Research Institute, where I published an explanation comment about FOIP based on the experience at MOFA. This is the explanation about FOIP that I mentioned. It can be accessed from the website of SPF-OPRI, the related official English website of Japanese government at the time, has been linked with this document. So please feel free to use them. And next is a book published in April 2020. This is co-authored with my research allies, Brendan Cannon and Ash Roster, who share the same understanding about FOIP. And next, regarding FOIP and FOIO, the theme of my presentation. Earlier this year, commentaries were published by ORF in India and ISDB in Sweden, co-authored with Professor K. Hakata of Seike University and Dr. Brendan Cannon, whom then I mentioned. Furthermore, NDAs conduct 3-year joint research project with Professor Hakata's Seike University titled The China Challenge and the Indo-Pacific. In June, I published a comprehensive commentary by myself through OP. I have provided a link to each commentary, so I hope you will find them useful. Well, now the screen is a chronology of FOIP in its early stage. I don't have much time today, so for more details, please refer to my first commentary that I introduced them. As you may know well, FOIP was announced at TICAD 6 in August 2016 by Prime Minister Abe. But the term strategy is not actually used here, and it will first appear in a special article in the Diplomatic Blue Book 2017 the following year. Image shown there is what is shown on the screen. Here is the latest version. Although there have been some change, the basic concept remains the same. Regarding the practical aspect of FOIP, so-called 3 pillars announced during President Trump's visit to Japan in November 2017 are well known. Initially, this was a little difficult to understand, but now the idea has been streamlined and the expressions have been revised as shown on the screen. Regarding the rule of law, which is used as a particularly important keyword, the Japanese government cited Prime Minister Abe's keynote speech at the Shangri-La Dialogue in May 2014. It was explained using 3 very simple principles. Another important point is that initiatives of relevant countries toward FOIP have been listing recently. I believe that the fact that FOIP is spreading across the world in this way is the most significant change since then. Based on such a recent trends mentioned then, I believe that the following can be said about FOIP. In other words, at the early stage, the Japan, US, Australia, India, Quad was initially considered to be core of FOIP. But now, there is a broader multilateral cooperation focused on inclusivity, such as ASEAN and European, and of course, including Nepal. It is a very important point, I think. I have given a quick overview of the basic understanding of FOIP promoted by Japan, but I would like to reiterate my viewpoint. FOIP is a philosophy to encourage the actor, such as China, which is a host to change the status quo, to comply with the free and open international order, such as the rule of law. Therefore, it is necessary to gain support from as many as countries possible in order to achieve such activities. Also, from this perspective, I'd like to propose the next stage of development from FOIP to FOIO. There was a very interesting case last October about this, so I would like to introduce it. I noticed that Prime Minister Kishida's policy speech at the Diet held on October 23, 2023. The expression free and open Indo-Pacific, which had been used continuously since Prime Minister Abe's policy speech at the Diet in January 2018, was replaced with free and open international order. At the time, this became a hot topic in Japan, as it was seen as a denial of the legacy of the Abe administration by Kishida. However, I don't see it that such a way. My understanding of this issue is as shown on the screen. It is reasonable that the Japanese government is trying to replace the FOIP with the FOIO. FOIP originally has a concept of aiming to build a FOIO. Since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, the international countries' interest has been directed beyond the Indo-Pacific region. So it is natural that FOIP, which has geographical boundaries, is replaced by the higher level concept of FOIO. However, it is not necessarily wise to uniformly replace FOIP, which is already an asset in Japan's foreign policy, with FOIO. The term FOIP itself is extremely important in terms of drawing international countries' attention to the Indo-Pacific region in relations with China. Therefore, it is important to use these terms appropriately on case by case, including the keyword rule of law. This concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Captain Retired Teruaki Aizawa. May I now invite Admiral Pradeep Chauhan for his presentation? So over to you.
Thank you very much. If you can, may I share my presentation? I have a few slides to offer. So while I load this, I just thought I would commence by thanking NICE for the opportunity to speak and to offer a few comments on this very important subject. So can you see my presentation?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We can.
Yes. Okay, so let me just go to full screen view. Basically, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about maintaining a free and open Indo-Pacific from the Indian perspective and build on the excellent remarks already proffered by Admiral Karambir Singh. Pramod, is the slide changing?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so as we all know that two broad systems currently engaged in a global competition. One is a state system that draws its legitimacy from a consensually derived rules-based order, and the other is a state system that seeks to disrupt consensually derived rules-based order and supplant it with an order whose rules are generated in an exclusive state. So as Cleo Paskal was mentioning, the United States advocates a system which tries to coordinate its own actions with those of major like-minded powers, particularly middle powers, including India, and contends that such a system is necessary to balance and counter belligerent actions by state actors that undermine and threaten the endurance of a liberal-based, rules-based order. Whereas in contrast and reflecting a desire to return to the Middle Kingdom period of Chinese hegemony, China seems to be pushing for a system of unipolarity that will be guided and governed by rules that would be formulated in Beijing a system that would situate China as the keystone of all facets of intra and extra regional affairs integration and engagement. And this is what is causing the current tensions within the Indo-Pacific and, I dare say, elsewhere. Now, as far as India is concerned, like every other country, India has a set of geo-economic goals and another set of non-geo-economic goals, which it is pursuing. I thought I would show you a few of these sample of our geo-economic goals and our non-geo-economic goals. We wish to develop a high-quality digitalized economy, moving from a $3 trillion nominal economy to a $30 trillion one by 2047, while avoiding the middle income trap and reducing national and regional wealth inequality. Our goal is to become a major manufacturing hub in global supply and value chains and become an advanced country by 2047. In terms of our non-geo-economic goals, we wish to sustain and maintain our territorial integrity and our cartographic identity. We want to build and enhance our prestige that is enjoyed by India. We are hoping our goal is to change the United Nations Security Council and take up membership there. And of course, as Admiral Karambir Singh has already said, be the preferred security partner within the Indo-Pacific and inspire the global South. So like every other country, we then, having established these goals, we now have geostrategies for the attainment of the geo-economic goals and other geostrategies for the attainment of our non-geo-economic goals. Many of these are now on the screen before you. I would like to emphasize the ones which are in green, which is the geostrategies for the attainment of non-geo-economic goals. Here we are seeking our strategy is to seek persistent advocacy of the UNSC, to be seen and be the first responder in HADR, be proactive in cooperative regional holistic structures, holistic security and stability structures, give tangible manifestation to an alternative to the US alliance system, and develop initiatives for connectivity of all shapes and forms. And so our grand strategy in the Indo-Pacific, our military strategy, our maritime strategy are all being increasingly contextualized to this vast space that we call the Indo-Pacific, which has already been described geographically by Admiral Karambir Singh. So for India, it's important to remember that for India, the Indo-Pacific is not in and of itself a strategy. It is rather a strategic geography. So unlike some of the other countries of the world, we don't have the Indo-Pacific as a strategy in and of itself, but it's a geography in which New Delhi pursues several inclusive, cooperative, and sometimes even competitive strategies, all of which are designed to promote India's core national interest, which is the economic, material, and societal well-being of the people of India. And so our grand strategy is founded upon these 5 Hindi words, all of which start with the sound of S, Samman, which is respect, Samvad, which is dialogue, Sahyog, which is cooperation, Shanti, which is peace, and Samriddhi, which is prosperity. And our engagement with the Indo-Pacific supports free and openness by saying that it will be inclusive, pluralistic, cooperative, collaborative, open, and transparent in both intent and action, and will promote dialogue, international law, a democratic and rules-based international order in which all nations, small and large, thrive as equal and sovereign. So India really believes that to maintain a free and open Indo-Pacific, all nations, big and small, must be able to enjoy economic, material, and societal growth in an environment of peace and security. And this is what is encapsulated in the acronym SAGAR, which Admiral Karambir Singh has expounded upon. I just thought I'd show you a diagrammatic depiction of SAGAR. This is our DIME. It's our diplomatic, our informational, our military, and economic outreach through the region. And giving first-order specificity to the policy of SAGAR is the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, which once again been touched upon by Admiral KB Singh, and I don't need to dwell upon it. It's important to remember that the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative is linked to SAGAR in that it provides first-order specificity to SAGAR by identifying 7 lines of maritime lines of thrust. And there are several nations that have already volunteered to lead one or more of these 7 lines of thrust, as you can see on this particular screen. Not all of these nations are located within the Indo-Pacific, but they all utilize it one way or another. So the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative is not a geographic construct. Now, as far as India is concerned, our strategy will always be like everybody else's, informed by an ongoing assessment of present and future risk in the region. And we have 7 major risks, one, I suppose, for each day of the week. They are shown on your screen here. And geopolitical constriction is a particularly problematic risk for us, particularly in current times where state-on-state conflict seems to be in the offing. And so, as far as we are concerned, our strategies within and to support the free and open Indo-Pacific in times of peace involves constructive engagement. And we're presently concentrating upon 5 major but very different approaches to this endeavor of constructive engagement. The first is through multilateral constructs. Many people think that the Indo-Pacific hasn't got enough overlapping constructs, but this noodle bowl diagram tends to dispel that particular point of view. And we think that IORA is of particular importance, and we're giving it a great deal of focus right now. India is about to take over the chairmanship of IORA early next year, and we hope that we will be able to provide the requisite impetus to this organization. Then our second approach is through the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, of which I've already spoken, and I don't need to dwell on any further. Our third is through minilaterals such as BIMSTEC, and this, as you can see, incorporates landlocked countries such as Nepal and Bhutan within its ambit. And Pramod has already indicated right in the very beginning why the NICE and Nepal per se is so interested in developments in the Indo-Pacific, and he's absolutely right. Also incorporating this particular minilaterals are the 7 trilaterals that India is engaged in the maritime domain: India, USA, Japan, India, Japan, Italy, India, Indonesia, Australia, India, Australia, France, India, France, UAE, India, Brazil, South Africa, and of course the 5 countries of the Colombo Security Dialogue, that is India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Mauritius, Maldives, and the Seychelles. Our fourth approach is the Quad. I think particularly that the best way, doing exactly what it should do, that is the best way to sustain a consensually derived rules-based order across the length and breadth of the Indo-Pacific, is for the Quad to weave the regional fabric together through cooperative economic frameworks, quality infrastructure, comprehensive maritime situational awareness and domain awareness, and collective HADR partnerships, health security, climate change, and clean energy transition. This is what will enable the region to prosper and grow in a condition of stability. And our last approach, our fifth approach, is the proactive promotion of connectivity, particularly maritime connectivity, in which we wish to be specific into the ports that are to be connected, what's the medium upon which this connectivity is to be maintained, which platforms or entities will enable the connectivity, what will be carried on those platforms, will there be cargo, will there be human beings, will there be data streams, will there be all of the above, what are the policies that we will put in place to facilitate this connectivity, and then what is the rules-based legal and normative practices that underpin maritime connectivity. So with these approaches, this is how India is approaching the maintenance of the Indo-Pacific as a free and open space, which is I do not see any great advantage in switching this to what my preceding speaker said, to the free and open international order, because the free and open Indo-Pacific itself rests upon a free and well-established, consensually derived rules-based order. And I'll stop there, and thank you for your attention. Pramod, over to you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. May I now move to the next speaker, Tobiáš Lipold, who is a research fellow at Sinopsis, Czech Republic, who will be speaking on European perspectives on the Indo-Pacific region. Over to you, Lipold.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, perfect. All right, wonderful. All right, so first of all, I would like to thank you for inviting me to this talk. And as you said, I would like to share my remarks on the European perspective on the Indo-Pacific region. So first of all, I would like to start saying that the invasion of Ukraine in February 2022 was a big wake-up call for Europe. It made the whole continent painfully aware that its security and the stability of its democracies, particularly in Central and Eastern Europe, are under threat. And Russia's aggression demonstrated the fragility of European peace, exposing vulnerabilities to infiltration and manipulation by authoritarian regimes. However, it was the declaration signed between Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping just days before the invasion started, which revealed an even broader reality that Russia's actions are part of a larger strategy to reshape the current world order, while this strategy envisions a multipolar world in which Russia and China dominate as two of its leading so-called poles. What quickly became clear is that in this so-called partnership without limits between the two countries, China is the senior partner. Its economic power, global reach, and strategic ambitions make it the driving force behind these efforts to challenge the international order. While Russia engages in regional destabilization, China's actions have global implications, influencing power dynamics in regions far beyond its borders. The emerging world order is increasingly divided into blocks, sort of resembling the polarization of the Cold War era, even though it's not the same. At its core, this division pits democratic states against authoritarian ones. In this context, the Indo-Pacific has become as critical to global stability as the Euro-Atlantic. And for Europe and the United States, the Indo-Pacific represents sort of a geographical counterpart to the Euro-Atlantic region, a shared space for collective defense of democratic values and international law. Where Russia poses a direct threat to the Euro-Atlantic region, China is viewed as a parallel challenge in the Indo-Pacific. And despite their differences, both powers seek to undermine the existing rules-based order. For the European Union, the current tensions with the PRC largely revolve around economic issues, such as protecting European markets from an influx of subsidized Chinese electric vehicles. And while these economic disputes are important, they should not overshadow the broader geopolitical stakes in the Indo-Pacific. Peace and stability in the region are not just regional concerns; they are global imperatives. Disturbances in the Indo-Pacific would have far-reaching consequences, impacting economies and security even in distant Europe. The urgency of this becomes even clearer when considering the re-election of Donald Trump in the United States, which will probably lead to a more isolationist US foreign policy, or at least it will be very unpredictable, which means that Europe cannot rely entirely just on Washington to safeguard stability in the Pacific, and it should play a proactive role itself. Among the most pressing flashpoints in the Indo-Pacific is the South China Sea, where China's aggressive territorial claims and militarization have raised tensions with its neighbors, particularly with Philippines or Vietnam. But also the Taiwan Strait is also the likely site of a potential broader conflict. Just this week, China has conducted its largest military maneuvers in 3 decades, with exercises encroaching on Taiwanese waters and coming alarmingly close to Japanese coast. These actions demonstrate that Beijing is willing to escalate tensions and its growing assertiveness in the region. To maintain peace in the Taiwan Strait, it is essential to keep Taiwan engaged with the international community. Since 1971, the PRC has worked systematically to isolate Taiwan, leveraging its influence to block the island's participation in international organizations. However, it is crucial not to fall for Beijing's game. Taiwan is a de facto independent democratic state that operates with its own government, economy, and institutions. And although current geopolitical realities limit formal recognition of Taiwan, there is ample space for meaningful relationships. Keeping Taiwan connected to the democratic world is one of the most effective ways to deter China from attacking or blockading the island. A robust international presence signals that Taiwan is not alone, reducing the likelihood of unilateral aggression by Beijing. The Czech Republic offers a compelling example of how even smaller European countries can contribute to this effort. Over the past several years, the Czech Republic has developed one of the most dynamic relationships with Taiwan among European nations. High-profile visits have underscored these ties, such as the 2020 trip by the President of the Czech Senate to Taipei, or the recent visit of Taiwanese Vice President Xiao Bikim to Prague. These exchanges symbolize more than diplomatic gestures, as they are also a testament of shared values and mutual interest. Beyond political visits, the Czech Republic and Taiwan are collaborating in practical and innovative ways. For example, a key area of cooperation is the semiconductor industry, where the Czech Republic is playing an important role in building a new supply chain in Central Europe. And this partnership is not just purely economically beneficial, but it also strengthens the resilience of these supply chains. Also, just this week, the Czech Parliament took another significant step by addressing the misuse of United Nations resolutions 2758 by the PRC. Beijing frequently cites this resolution to justify Taiwan's exclusion from international organizations, despite the fact that the resolution itself is not making any statements on Taiwan's sovereignty. By rejecting this misinterpretation, the Czech Parliament joined the ranks of other democratic nations such as the United Kingdom, Australia, or Netherlands, whose legislative bodies also made these steps. Also, in 2022, the Czech Republic was the first Central and Eastern European country to adopt its own Indo-Pacific strategy, and it also took the enhancing of the relations between Europe and Indo-Pacific as one of its priorities during its EU presidency in the second half of 2022. So I would say that the Czech Republic's action highlights an important fact that even small countries can play a meaningful role in promoting stability and upholding democratic values, and that geographic distance from the Indo-Pacific does not diminish Europe's stake in the region's peace. And on the contrary, Europe's actions or inactions can have profound implications for the region and the global order. So I will stop here. And
thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Tobiáš Leann. Here we come to the end of the session, and we have around 30 minutes, 25 minutes for the discussion. So I'd like to open the floor for discussion. We have few questions that we have received on different platforms. One is that how does China's BRI interact or conflict with the goals of free and Indo-Pacific? Second is that how does FOIP, which is Free Open Indo-Pacific Strategy, address the balance of power between major nations such as US, China, India, and Japan in the Indo-Pacific region? There are also questions, one is for Admiral Pradeep Chauhan, that are the Quad countries, all the 4 Quad countries, do they align with the Indo-Pacific strategy, or they have differences? If yes, what are the major differences? So maybe I'll continue in the same order. Maybe I'll first invite Captain Retired Teruaki Aizawa to make his remarks. So over to you. There are a few questions. One, like, how does Indo-Pacific strategy vary with China's Belt and Road Initiative? And second is that how does FOIP strategy address the balance of power between the major powers? So over to you.
Okay, Doctor. I would like to answer the chat question. Okay. Then I mentioned. Yes. Okay. Sorry. Japanese government under the Abe administration, the Japanese government has stated its position that it cooperates with China to promote hope if the China agree with this concept. However, this is quite difficult in reality. The idea behind hope is to promote to each country a set of principles that no one can oppose, and to create momentum in which China will have no choice but to accept them in the future. It may take a time, but I believe it is extremely important to continue this effort steadily. Of course, it goes without saying that this should be carried out in conjunction with the balance of power that they hold to respond militarily to and containment forces that change the status quo, including China. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. May I now invite Admiral Chauhan to make his remarks, and then I'll go to other speakers.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just wanted to address this issue of whether the Quad strategy is shared by the Quad partners, and if not, what are the differences? Let me reiterate something, that for India, the Indo-Pacific is not a strategy. It was announced as a strategy by the first administration of President Trump, or President Trump 1.0, but India did not subscribe and does not subscribe to the Indo-Pacific being equated to a single strategy. The Indo-Pacific, once again, for India is a strategic geography in which India will have a number of strategies. Hopefully, they will all be mutually reinforcing for the nation of the region as a whole, and obviously for the 3 remaining partners of Quad. I do not think that this Indian approach to this Indo-Pacific as a strategic geography in which multiple strategies are evolved is very different, or any way different from that of either Japan or Australia. I don't know about the USA. We have to wait and see what they come up with in the second iteration of President Trump's presidency. But I think that the Quad members are quite clear and are quite uniform in their approach to what the Quad ought to be doing. Even if you are going to say that the Quad is about China, which it is not, it is about getting the region more resilient so that disruptions of the kinds that we are seeing in supply chains, and the disdain that we are seeing for the sovereignty of smaller nations is brought to an end, and the region is made more robust. So the Quad, even if you were to assume that the Quad was still to talk about China, then the way to tackle China is really to stitch the region together tightly enough in symbiotic and mutually reinforcing mechanisms so that China does not have the strategic space in which to make this entry and provide for divisions in the segments of the Indo-Pacific, whether they are the eastern segment of the Indo-Pacific, namely the Pacific, or the western segment of the Indo-Pacific, namely the Indian Ocean. In both cases, Quad is attempting very hard to provide information through IPMDA, economic reforms through the IPEF, the whole business of resilient infrastructure, the whole effort being made to provide for healthcare and provide for a more robust set of interlocking mechanisms which are not geared against somebody. So there's always space. And that is why the Indian approach to the Indo-Pacific is always prefixed by another adjective, which is inclusive. And we think that exclusion is probably a poor way to go about the strategy. And if there is a country, in this case China, which is harping upon exclusivity, then that is something that we need to. And that is what the Quad is doing, but not as a military construct, but as a whole of many governments or whole of region, if you like, approach, even though it is spearheaded by 4 countries. And that, I think, will change over time. My last comment is that I think it's a very bad idea to name constructs based upon some geometric shape, because it precludes your ability to freely expand or contract the shape. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. We have, maybe I'd also like to invite Admiral Karambir Singh to make his remarks if you want to comment on those questions.
Thank you so much. Very eloquently explained by Admiral Chauhan. I just wanted to add a little bit about Quad. Quad has taken the correct approach because it's focusing on providing public goods and regional resilience by addressing the region's most pressing challenges. Like to take about the technology part, when they look at critical and emerging technologies, the global semiconductor value chain, climate action, HADR, green shipping network, a coalition for disaster resilient infrastructure, COVAX, which is health. So I think the Quad has done something which has lifted it beyond, security alliances, etc. Our external affairs minister very rightly says that Quad is a leap of strategic imagination and shows an ability to look beyond alliances. So I just thought I'll add this about Quad, and success breeds imitation, and you've seen the I2 coming up, though it's primarily economic, and even people are talking about a Squad, etc. Similarly, when you look at the BRI and the Indo-Pacific, the fact that Indo-Pacific, whatever you call it, a strategy or whatever, it ensures at least 2 things different from the BRI. One is, or OBOR. One is the issue of respecting sovereignty. And second, what the Quad is doing through the IPF is having development without debt, based on good financial models. So I think that is one area where we need to differentiate between the Chinese OBOR or the GDI, GSI, GCI, and various other enunciation. As far as the FOIP and the balance, anything you wanted to say something?
No, sir, please continue.
So as far as the FOIP, it's not something about balance of power. FOIP is basically to ensure that we have peace, prosperity, and rule-based order, which promotes predictability in the Indo-Pacific. So we should dispense with this idea that FOIP has got to do with great power contestation or anything. These are the points that I have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We have lots of questions which I'd like everyone to address again. Like, what is the future of Indo-Pacific strategy in Trump 2.0? There are lots of questions in similar lines, like, do you think Trump is serious on that, or what will be the implication of other countries and all? So maybe if anyone want to address that as well, I'd like to move to Cleo Paskal if you want to address previous question, and also on the future of Indo-Pacific strategy in Trump 2.0.
Thank you very much. It is always daunting to follow the fine teams from NMF. First of all, BRI, if I may. So the Belt and Road Initiative, it looks like it's an infrastructure, but from my perspective, what BRI stands for is the Bribery and Repression Initiative, because what it fundamentally exports is a Chinese Communist Party way of doing business. And along with those infrastructure projects, they may look like, I mean, they're presented as much needed, legitimately needed pieces of infrastructure so it has this sort of commercial face to it. But there's very often a strategic underpinning that doesn't necessarily benefit the recipient country. Sometimes it does, but often it almost, in fact, it almost always benefits China. And there is also very often a corruption component to it, which distorts the economics and politics of the recipient country. So along with it being an exportation of kind of physical and economic pieces of infrastructure, I have, from what I've seen, it also exports these ways of doing business, the bribery and the repression that you see, quite frankly, a lot of the Chinese people suffering under on a very regular basis. In terms of the Indo-Pacific, there's a question, if everybody has these strategies, but or except for India, quite rightly, but is there a vision underpinning it? What is the ultimate goal for these strategies? And of course, it's been elucidated somewhat, but there's a kind of a growing interest here in Washington, but it started off, the first time I heard about it was in India, for there to be something like an Indo-Pacific Charter, which replicates, but in its own way, the Atlantic Charter of 1941, so which enunciates what the goal is, what is the vision for the region that doesn't have to be defined geographically, but what underpins it. And I heard it most recently at an event at Heritage, think tank here in Washington, where Congresswoman Radewagen from American Samoa talked about the urgent need for effectively an Indo-Pacific Charter. If you draw, she was reflecting on what had happened at APEC and on the new Peruvian Chinese-built port in Peru. And if you draw sort of a line from Shanghai to Peru, it goes through American Samoan exclusive economic zone. And there is a lot of concern about what that sort of increased activity would do and how important it is to almost codify some of the vision that is encapsulated in the words around inclusive, free, and open Indo-Pacific, in the same way that the Atlantic Charter made it very clear that, if we have to fight a war, this is what we're fighting for, including national sovereignty and, no colonies and things like that. So just to broaden out the discussion a little bit, some countries have strategies, some countries don't. Some countries have different definitions of what the Indo-Pacific is from each other. But ultimately, perhaps countries can be knit together on this shared vision as a starting point, that then if they do have a strategy, they make sure that that strategy underpins. On Trump 2.0 in the Indo-Pacific, we'll see who ends up getting put into different positions. But again, this personnel is policy thing. But I think it's very clear that there's going to be a lot more understanding and interest in the region as a whole. There's a lot more discussion about China, but also there are people within the new administration, or at least being put forward for very important positions within the new administration, that are first or second generation, for example, Indo-American, who can bring a wealth of depth and understanding about the region, and at least awareness, so that people in the depths of some of the departments don't get away with pawning off very old definitions or understandings of the region. Very hard to know how it'll play out, obviously, but this is a much more of an Indo-Pacific focused administration than an Atlantic focused administration. And we saw that definitely under Trump 1.0. And so far, based on who he's trying to get confirmed by the Senate, I would expect that would continue and accelerate in Trump 2.0. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'd also like to request other people to respond. There's another question like, how is China going to impact the recent cordial ties between India and Russia, and getting proximity between China and India going to impact the Indo-Pacific? So there's another question like, how the new changing geopolitics of closer ties between Russia, Modi and Xi Jinping going to impact. So overall, the question is like, in the new changing geopolitics, how Indo-Pacific is going to be impacted. So maybe I'd like to request other speakers. Admiral Chauhan, would you like to comment? One on the future of Quad during Trump, and second, the new geopolitical changes between the engagement between India and Russia, India and China going to impact the whole Indo-Pacific strategy.
Yeah, thank you very much. Those are very interesting questions. The first one I think has already been answered somewhat eloquently by Cleo. But the issue about Russia is a question that I receive very frequently, particularly in Europe, where people ask us, what is India doing in the in constructs like the SCO or constructs like the BRICS? And I wanted to emphasize that it is in everybody's interest that India is, in fact, in these organizational structures, because India then, if India has sufficient heft and sufficient weight, then India can present itself as the, within inverted commas, as the adult in that room. And consequently, India's engagement of Russia is critical, because not only for India's own somewhat narrow military aspects, which are easily, or if not easily, but at least capable of being put aside, but the fact that India presents an alternative all the time to Russia in its tightening embrace with China is really quite important, because the greatest nightmare for everybody, whether in Europe or in the USA or in the other countries of Quad, or for that matter, India, or the whole of the Indo-Pacific, the greatest nightmare is that we will end up with an axis of strategic and military nature between China and Russia and North Korea and possibly one or two other actors that are not in conformity with our belief that consensus is what should drive a rules-based order. And therefore, when we enter these engagements, we present Russia with a standard question, which is: Are you sure? Are you sure you wish to abandon us altogether and fall in bed with the Chinese alone? Are you certain? And the more powerful India is economically, diplomatically, militarily, the more heft we carry, the more will be the Russian reluctance to become the junior partner, as has already been mentioned by Tobiáš, to China. And that can only be to the good of everybody, because this Russia-Ukraine will sooner, if not rather than later, resolve itself. And then we will have to deal with Russia. Right now, none of the powers other than India, I think, is actually talking to Russia. You're talking at Russia. And Russia is not talking to you. Russia is talking at you. The only people who therefore can swing the Russian Chinese embrace around to a much more holistic and inclusive Russia is India. So that's what I wanted to say about the India-Russia equation. But the broader question of whether the Russia-Chinese relationship will impact the Indo-Pacific adversely in the present circumstances, unless there is some radical shift of thinking in China, and I do not see that happening under the present regime, I fear that the embrace between Russia and China will be to the detriment of almost all powers within the Indo-Pacific, barring perhaps North Korea or one or two other such states. So if we do nothing, if business continues as usual, then this particular embrace will be to the detriment of the region. Consequently, since we have all got the region's best interest at heart, and that brings me to what Cleo just said, and one amplification of that to say that, look, the desired end state throughout the Indo-Pacific is the same, and that is to assure the economic, the material, and the societal well-being of each of the peoples of each of the states that either belong to in terms of geography or operate within in terms of functionality, the Indo-Pacific. It is this end state that we all want our people to be prosperous, to be secure in an atmosphere, in an environment of peace that will finally, eventually, and inevitably promote prosperity. And if this is our common aim, then countries that are espousing a much more sinister aim need to be countered. And that is what I think we are trying to do vis-a-vis Russia. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. We have hardly 2-3 minutes. So maybe if any of the speakers want to make any remarks, we'll be happy to take. Excellency Johnston, would you like to share something?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to the previous speakers for their points on the Quad. I think that Australia sees it in very much the same light. We see it as a diplomatic partnership. It is about how we can work together effectively to promote an open, stable and prosperous Indo-Pacific region, which is free from intimidation and coercion. Sovereignty is respected and where competition is managed responsibly. And how, to the question about how will Quad manage under Trump 2, our position is that we work with any leader of the day, no matter who that person is, to continue to promote those aspirations for Quad. And I think in response to China and the Belt and Road Initiative, we probably take a slightly calibrated approach and say that, look, we support projects if they are in the interests of both countries, where it would be of economic benefit to that country, where they're sorry, I just lost my train, sorry. And so I think that potentially there can be some good, but that has to be good for both countries. And so we don't rule it out entirely, but we do watch with interest, and we do provide and encourage countries to think carefully about the long-term and the full cost nature of the projects being proposed. And so, again, if it contributes towards peaceful, stable, and prosperous region, then go for it. But just be wary, clearly. But thank you to all of the previous speakers for their contributions. I think we are all lined up on the intent of Quad and the desirability of having a safe and prosperous region. Thanks.
Thank you so much. If any of the speaker want to make any remarks, we still have 2 minutes. Otherwise, we'll end up the session here.
So may I just
Yes,
make
sir.
a small remark? Yeah,
Yes.
This thing about Trump 2.0, 2.0 and Quad from India's perspective, my view is that Trump 1.0, this restarted the Quad. The vice ministers meeting in 2017, upgraded to apex level in 2018, and the Quad meeting in Tokyo in 2020. They all show that this particular the construct, the Quad, it doesn't suffer from problems of alliances. It's not there in the Quad. It's much more enduring because the whole the mission or whatever objectives they have set out can be progressed and will be mentored. So I just thought I'll just put this in.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, everyone. We had a very interesting panel with very distinguished scholars and experts. We had Excellency Jean Johnston, Australian Ambassador to Nepal. We had Admiral Karambir Singh, Cleo Paskal, Captain Retired Teruaki Aizawa, and Admiral Pradeep Chauhan, Tobiáš Lipold. Thank you so much for your remarks. I would like to end it here.